Hello everyone, it's me, Clayton. I just finished watching episode 8 of The Last of Us. Now, for this penultimate episode, we see that Ellie happens to come across a band of cultists led by a man named David. While he may seem like a father figure to both his kin, his flock, as well as to Ellie at one point, it's very clear that this guy is more sinister than meets the eye, and definitely not a good father figure, unlike Joel. And while Joel happens to recover, Ellie has to go through her own personal trauma as David plans to cut her up and eat her. Let's get to the story, shall we? The story of the episode really happens to follow the game somewhat, but also it makes a few changes. There's a few lines that are worked around in comparison to the game. For example, there's when David captures Ellie, he says that he sees a lot of himself in her, and that he thinks that she should lead his cult along with him, which I don't think was in the game, but I think it does factor into David's own sense of narcissism and arrogance, and honestly, I think it helps with his manipulation. I get a sense of how he's able to get a lot of these people to join his group, even when he happens to beat up children who he disagrees with, or when he happens to intimidate his own men sometimes. An interesting thing is that David's right-hand man, James, is actually played by Troy Baker, who plays Joel in the original video game. It's funny that both Joel and Tommy's original voice actors get to play as secondary antagonists in this series. Most would just give these guys tiny little cameos as incidental characters or maybe as clickers, but I like the way that this show handles it, giving them actual speaking roles in specific episodes. But, of course, Scott Shepherd happens to be the main star of this one, outside of Joel and Ellie. And I really like his take on David. He's very manipulative, he's very arrogant, but at the same time, he can be quite intimidating when he wants to be. Even when he's been stabbed multiple times, and even when his whole resort that he happens to run comes burning down. I know that Nolan North is terrifying in the original game, but I think Scott Shepherd's version is just as good. They're both good performances of a late game antagonist who honestly pushes Ellie to her absolute limits in both versions. And while Joel doesn't save Ellie in the traditional way, I like the fact that he does get to comfort her after she's clearly been traumatized by the entire experience. And who can blame her? If I had to deal with someone named David, I'd be pretty messed up too. On top of that, I really do appreciate that Joel has his darker side shown here. Not only does he kill some of David's men, but he actually tortures two of them in a very Jack Bauer way. It really does show how far Joel's willing to go to protect those he loves, and also his more anti-hero side that the game showed a bit more than in the show, but considering that the show isn't as long as the game, and considering that more of the game was shown from Joel's perspective, I can see why it was done that way. So, now we're 8 episodes in. There's only 1 episode left to go for the season. And judging by how popular this show is, it's more than likely that we're going to get another season. So I don't think we're going to get to the exact end that the original game got to at the end of this first season, but I do think that in a second we will, as well as the fact that it'll probably adapt part of the second game, or at least their version of it. So, will they be able to stick the landing, and can this be known as one of the great video game adaptations by doing it? We can only hope, but I have some high hopes for next week's season finale. See you next time.